going to sit after a bit, which hopefully that won't annoy you. And let me cheat a little bit, use some notes. This is an awkward time to talk about the Foreign Service. I've lived through Vietnam and Watergate and Iran-Contra and two Gulf Wars, and I have never seen anything quite like the current situation in Washington. The morale of not just State Department employees, but of all the federal government employees, I think is pretty close to rock bottom right at the moment, because nobody knows what's going to go on. Everybody wonders what the sound of the draining of the swamp is going to be like. But I will say, to be optimistic, Rex Tillerson has run ExxonMobil. He knows what an ambassador does. He knows what embassies do. He's not coming in, threatening to abolish the thing, or not coming in having forgotten the name of the department altogether. So there is some hope. He's also hired a chief of staff. Her name escapes me at the moment, but Margaret Peterlin, who's been around in Washington for a long time. She knows how the government works, and that's useful as well. So there's a lot of near-term uncertainty, but institutions, including the State Department, especially the State Department, have gone through periods of transitions before and have a remarkable resilience and survival ability. So I'm going to take the long view and assume that what I tell you today will be relevant in the coming days. There's always the possibility that it won't be. So just keep that in mind. What I'm going to do is briefly touch on the basics, stuff that you should know, most of which you can find out on your own. Most of which you, if you're really interested in Foreign Service, you probably already have found out on your own, but I'll go over it. Then I'll tell you a few war stories. I'll explain what's going on behind me. And then I'll introduce briefly some hard issues that Foreign Service officers need to face if they contemplate a career. And finally, not finally, but hopefully half the time allotted to us, I'll just take your questions and do the best I can. Basics. According to the website, the first one up there, there are 8 basic steps to getting into the Foreign Service. One is you have to choose a cone. Let's pause there for a moment. What's a cone? It's a specialization within the Foreign Service. There are 5 of them: political, economic, management, consular, and public diplomacy. Public diplomacy used to have its own agency, the U.S. Information Agency, but is now part of the State Department. Political and economic are remarkably similar. It's just that political officers look at the political situation, analyze it, report on it, promote political interests of the U.S. government to the host government, wherever you happen to be. Economic is the same stuff, but with economic issues. Management is running the embassy, anywhere from making sure the electricity works, which is a huge challenge in some embassies, to planning the building of residences and new embassies, and making sure people come and go and get what they need to do their jobs. Consular is you issue visas, you issue passports, you get Americans out of jail. Some days can be pretty challenging, like if you have a plane crash in your country and things like that. Earthquakes. I have 2 half-sisters in the Foreign Service. They are Agency for International Development. I'll talk about that. One of them just came from Nepal. She was there for the earthquake. She had her mother there and 2 small children. So it was quite a challenge for her, and I'm sure a very huge challenge for whoever was the chief consular officer there. Public diplomacy, basically telling the public in the country you're in what the United States is about, managing cultural exchanges. It's essentially actually selling not just U.S. policy, but selling the United States as a country and a culture. So step one, you have to choose a cone. That's sort of unfortunate. When I entered the Foreign Service, I didn't have to choose a cone. I was sent to Quito, Ecuador, and I got to work in every section, then only 4 State Department sections. Political, economic, consular. Consular was great. I was one of 2 consular officers, and everybody in Ecuador wanted to go to the United States in those days. And they had to go through either me or my boss, who was not a whole lot older than I was. And even getting to be ambassador many years later, I've never felt quite the power I felt as the consular officer in Quito, Ecuador. I was recognized on the street, accosted. And you know, immigration policy is tough, so a lot of people got refused. Okay, step 1, choose a cone. Step 2, register for the Foreign Service exam. Take the test. It's now offered, I believe, 3 times a year, February, June, October. I think there are a couple of testing locations in Tucson. Then you have to do a personal narrative, which you send to the quality evaluation panel, qualifications evaluation panel. Decide whether you can go on to the oral exam, which is an all-day exercise where you do a lot of group exercises with the candidates and have personal interviews. And it's basically designed to stress you a little bit and see how you operate under time pressures and how you work with other people. Then, you get past that, you have to get a medical clearance. You have to be healthy enough to serve overseas. And you have to have a security clearance, which security clearances can be lengthy, particularly if you spend a lot of time overseas. But if you spend a lot of time overseas, you tend to be a better candidate, so it's a trade-off there. Then there's a suitability review panel, which I guess they take everything, your exam and your oral interview performance and your narrative statement, your security clearance, and they decide whether you can be an employee. And the final step is you go on a register, and when they need people, they pull them off the register. I was very lucky. I entered in a year when the end of the fiscal year was coming. They had a lot of money left over, and I was one of over 100 people who entered simultaneously the Foreign Service. It doesn't happen very often. So, okay, you probably think of the Foreign Service as a State Department, but there's also the U.S. Agency for International Development, which reports to the Secretary of State now. There's also the Foreign Commercial Service. There's also the Foreign Agricultural Service. Treasury sends some people overseas. The FBI sends some people overseas, often called the legal attaché. CIA sends people overseas. Do not tell anybody about them. And you may find them at your embassy. And, there can be, clearly the military has a presence at your embassy, defense attachés, foreign military sales people administering that program. In Oman, we had a bunch of people from the Air Force managing pre-positioned equipment for the Air Force at various Omani air bases. So you may end up at an embassy, a big embassy like Iraq. You may end up with 30 different U.S. government agencies, with some representation. 13 dimensions, according to the website. In my day, it was only 5, which I think are, but let me read the 13 and you can look them up. Composure is always a good thing. Cultural adaptability, experience of motivation, information, integration and analysis, initiative and leadership, judgment, objectivity and integrity. We kind of took those for granted in my day. Oral communication, planning and organizing, resourcefulness, working with others, written communication, quantitative analysis. All right. would break that down into 5, and each of which you may want to drill deeper on, but substantive knowledge. How much do you know? The older you are, chances are the more you know, the more experience you've had, etc. Leadership, certainly oral communication comes under that, but judgment and composure and working with others. Managerial skills, being able to organize, as somebody explained to me, being able to organize more than a 2-car funeral. Intellectual skills, cultural sensitivity. If you know the answer without thinking very hard about it as to which is more impressive to women, the burqa or the bikini, chances are you need more cultural sensitivity. If you can imagine how silly our way of celebrating a birthday seems to other cultures. In other words, we sing this terrible song and we light a cake on fire. If you can appreciate how silly that is, then you have some cultural sensitivity, I think. Interpersonal skills, getting along with others. As my book is called Talking to Strangers, I should tell you, when I went to Iraq in 2003, my granddaughter called me. She was 4, actually. Her father called me. My granddaughter got on the phone. She said, "Are you going somewhere dangerous, Grandpa?" I said, "Well, it might be a little dangerous, but, I'm going to be fine." And she said, "Well, don't talk to strangers." Which, of course, is exactly what I was sent to Iraq to do. And that's often what if you're a Foreign Service officer, what you'll have to do. Okay. Resources. Let me explain them just briefly. The basic careers on the State Department website. There's plenty of stuff there. If you're not familiar with it, get familiar with it if you're truly interested in what's going on. There's also something interesting, sort of one step short of a real internship. It's called the Virtual Student Foreign Service. It's a way to sign up with the State Department and participate from here or wherever you are in sort of a minor internship. Have you done it? There's a book, which if you're serious, you should get. It's called Inside a U.S. Embassy. Anybody seen it? One person. I'm sure there's a copy around here because I can't find my copy. Some students walked off with it. But I'm sure it's in the library, and you can get it by going to this website, or you can get it from Amazon. The 3rd edition is the one you should get because it has a very thick section at the end about how to get into the Foreign Service, how to prepare for the exams and stuff like that. Editions 1 and 2 each have a little piece by me, though, so if you stumble across edition 1 or edition 2, don't just move on, but take a look at my piece. One's about the Gulf War 1991. The other is about my time in Iraq in 2003. Foreign Service blogs. This is a great resource because you get Foreign Service officers who tell you what they're doing and tell you what they're unhappy about, how their day went. You have to there's a lot of them, so you have to kind of surf through them and see what appeals to you. But it's a good resource. This, if you're really a nerd about the Foreign Service, you can find oral histories of people who've gone before us. I've got an oral history there. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my career, but if that's not enough, I think it will be for most of you. You can go find my oral history and find more. This seems to be the best outside the State Department website for preparing you for exams. But I put caveat there because I'm not familiar with it. It didn't exist when I was coming into the Foreign Service. So I'm not sure. They say it doesn't cost you anything, but please approach it with caution. Finally, there used to be a diplomat in residence here probably 20 years ago, I guess. Then it was up at ASU for he or she, and now it's he or she is all the way over at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque, which isn't too helpful. But if you do have a specific question that somebody closer to the Foreign Service than I am right now would need to answer, that would be a resource. And then finally, here's me. Email me and I'll get back to you. Just remind me that you were here today. All right. Okay, let me tell you my story a little bit. I grew up wanting to be an astronaut. I was a high school student when the Soviets sent Sputnik up into space, and there was a huge push for the United States to catch up. And so I went to MIT to study aeronautical engineering. And by my third year at MIT, I think I realized I wasn't cut out to be an engineer. Plus my eyesight started to fail. You couldn't be an astronaut without 20/20 vision. The real reason was I think I was surrounded by people who were going to be better engineers than I was. And so I started looking at what you might call being an astronaut on Earth, international relations. I ended up getting a internship in Spain for the Instituto Nacional de Técnica Aeroespacial, which is a very fancy name for a materials lab that looked at Iberia airplanes that crashed or weakened. I didn't learn much engineering, but I learned some Spanish, and I learned I really liked the experience of trying to figure out another culture. My poor roommate working on me with Spanish, he would ask me to say the word for dog, which is perro, but I kept saying perro. He said, "No, perro!" Like Ramon de Ramirez no tiene rabo porque Ramon de Ramirez se lo ha cortado. Say that. So, the next summer I went on a work camp to Korea. Actually, Japan. We spent 3 weeks in Japan on the way to Korea. Korea was really a poor country then, so I learned a little bit about surviving in the developing countries. I've been back to Korea like 39 years later. It's not a developing country anymore, but that also stoked my interest. 1966. I had taken in 65 the written exam, and I passed it, and I guess it was still 65. I took the oral exam, which was then 2 hours long. 3 Foreign Service officers sat, like judges. I sat out in the center of the room, like over there, and there was a water pitcher there and a glass, which I didn't touch because it looked like it had 14 moving parts, so I knew I would screw it up. They said at the end, you passed, but you're a little weak on U.S. culture, so you should read the back pages of Time and Newsweek. I haven't read Time or Newsweek, except if it's on the internet for years, but in those days I would read Time or Newsweek back to front. Never quite kicked that habit. I don't know if that gave me much cultural information, but it seemed to help. So I passed at 6 o'clock one morning. I lived in California with my newly married wife. 6 o'clock in the morning, my landlord got a call from the State Department. They apparently didn't have my number. I'm not sure I had a number. 6 o'clock in the morning meant that somebody walked in Washington, D.C. at 9 o'clock, picked up a list and started dialing the phone. That was not my only time where people challenged by time zones in my life. But it was good to get the call. And I went to Washington in the next couple of weeks, went through a 4-month, I think it was, no, 2-month orientation course. Everybody calls it A100. essentially learned how the government worked. I'm not sure what they teach in A100 right now, since the government is not working. And then I went to language training, even though I had some Spanish from that time in Spain. This was intensive. That's all you did all day for 4 months. There was, right after the introduction course, there was a kind of assembly where you got your assignment. And I had asked for Latin America, I think, because it was Spanish. And my wife, when I came home, she guessed where I had been assigned. I have no idea how. I think she looked at a map of Latin America and decided that the place that most obscure to her, at least, was Ecuador. And indeed, that's why we were sent to Quito, Ecuador. And I think it was not quite 2 years later, I asked to go to Europe. And I got a one-line message asking me to report to Washington by such and such a date to finish training. I said to myself, finish what training? And I took this message around to some of my colleagues, and they said, have you noticed how many N's there are in finish? I said, oh. They said, maybe you're going to Helsinki. And indeed I did. But I had 9 months of finish training. It is my most useless skill. But I do want to share it with you. First of all, does anybody see the significance of this word? It's a Finnish word. It means soap seller. Soap seller. Saippuva is a soap. Alpias is soap. You know what a palindrome is?
Oh, sure.
World's longest single-word palindrome, I'm told. Could be fake news. This word, it's my favorite because it's so obscure looking. It's pronounced yatara, and it means ice cream. And I am one of the few people on campus who can pronounce Lowry Markkinen's hometown, Uvasco. Everybody know who Lowry Markkinen is? Oh my God. He plays basketball for UVA. 7 foot tall, 3-point shooter. All right. See, already, you guys, there's some extra knowledge you need to have. All right, he comes from Uvasco, which is sort of the middle of Finland, where they speak the purest Finnish. It was said the British used to send their foreign service officers to Uvasco to learn Finnish. I learned it in Washington, D.C., and when I got to Finland, I wasn't sure it wasn't a trick, because I'd only really spoken Finnish to my teacher. And when I got to Helsinki Harbor, we came by boat from Sweden, I was stunned to hear people actually speaking the language, although of course they did not speak it like my straight grammarian teacher in Washington, D.C. They spoke a lot of slang. It took me quite a while to catch up. But it was a fun experience, and as I said, it's not terribly useful later in my career. Worked 3 years in Finland. I came back to Washington. I was in Washington I was actually in the States for 9 years. As you've gathered by now, I had 2 languages. I ended up most of my career in the Middle East, and having had 2 languages, the State Department doesn't teach you a 3rd language, so whatever Arabic I learned, I had to pick up by myself. Arabic is not an easy language, as some of you may appreciate. But I did, my last assignment in Oman, I did give my farewell address to the diplomatic corps in Arabic. I had a lot of time with the teacher. I had a little text in Arabic, which I read. And they understood it, which was good. So in Washington, I was, initially, I got 6 months of economic training. My guess is training opportunities may not be quite as much as they used to be, but still, they're pretty extensive. You get a lot of training after you enter the Foreign Service. So I got 6 months of economic training, and then after a 2-3 year assignment in the Economic Bureau, I got a year in graduate school paid for by the government. It's the best deal I can imagine. They sent me back to Stanford where I went to graduate school, so I had a 3rd year at Stanford on the government, which was unbelievably good. Came back to Washington, I ended up spending 9 years in the United States, which was a violation of what was then the 8-year rule. I think it's now a 5-year rule. And I had to have a waiver from the Secretary of State to stay the 9th year, which I did because I had a very nice assignment with the U.S. Trade Representative's office. Then I was going to Brasilia. I had the assignment lined up and came home to my wife and says, I'm going to be the economic counselor in Brasilia. She said, I don't want to go to Brazil. Isn't there anything else? And I said, okay, I'll take a look. And I went back. I'd been to Brasilia. And, there are Brazilians there. How bad could it be? It's not Rio. So I found Cairo was open. So I came back to my wife and I said, well, Cairo's open, but you don't want to go to Cairo. It's a dirty, dusty, noisy city. Well, she did want to go to Cairo. And I went back and I expressed, the teeniest little bit of interest in Cairo when I was frog marched up to the Deputy Assistant Secretary's office and signed up for Cairo before I knew what had happened to me. And for the first 6 months, I don't think I liked it at all. It wasn't dirty, dusty, and noisy. But there came a moment, I was driving back from the other side of the Nile River where the embassy and my house was. And we were late, and it was dark, and the roads were just choked with all kinds of people, animals, cabooses. What's a caboose? Water buffalo. And donkeys, and what have you, man. It was just a white knuckle driving all the time. And I finally got to the bridge coming across the Nile, and I'm trying to turn right to go south to Mahdi, where my home was. And this pickup truck just went over the sidewalk to get into the spot I was trying to get into. So my Arabic was terrible, so I yelled and swore in English. And the driver looked down at me from his fairly high spot in the pickup truck, and had a baseball cap on, and he took it off and he tipped it and gave me a big smile. And I started to laugh. And I never had a problem in Cairo after that. Cairo was Cairo, I went back to Washington. I was director of Egyptian Affairs, which was a pretty challenging job. I had another year of training at the end of that, called sort of the equivalent, the State Department equivalent of the War College, which I believe does not exist anymore. But it sent us around to kind of relearn what American problems are. Went to Detroit, went to the border, rode around with the Border Patrol in El Paso, rode around with a cop in Detroit. Stayed on a dairy farm, went to Atlanta, went to Miami, went to Mexico City. It was good stuff. Then I had to go overseas again. My kids were by now grown. My kids were in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I have 2 kids of the same age. They're not twins. One's adopted, one's not. They were born in Finland, both of them, and they lived 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in Egypt. We were walking distance to the American school, and they had a fine time. They kicked and screamed when we told them they were going to Egypt, and they kicked and screamed when we told them they were going back to Washington, Fairfax, where we did. So, good experience. We watched them graduate. Well, actually, I had to fly back from Saudi Arabia. My next assignment was DCM, Deputy Chief of Mission in Saudi Arabia, acting ambassador. And I had to go early because our ambassador was thrown out, essentially by the king. We can talk about that if you want. an embassy with not a whole lot of experience in running an embassy. So it wasn't just an embassy, it was an embassy with about 1,500 Americans working under 2 large military missions. And of course, there was a lot of bad blood between the Saudis and the U.S., which resulted in the ambassador being thrown out. I ended up in charge of that embassy for about 15 months of my 4 years. I was in charge when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. We did have an ambassador then, but he was on leave. He flew back with the Secretary of Defense, a guy named Dick Cheney, you may have heard of him. And we essentially worked 6.5, 7 days a week up until the following, that was August, up until the following March. A lot of the work was just dealing with visitors coming from Washington. Everybody in Washington came, every senator, every congressman. And visitors are a major challenge, sometimes headache. Presidential visit it's hard to describe. The crazy things you have to go through to prepare for a presidential visit. The Vice President came, Secretary of State came 9 times, Secretary of Defense 5 times, and all the congressmen and senators. It was busy, and I got nominated as ambassador to Oman, largely because I was there at the center of the news cycle for 6 or 7 months. And so I owe my ambassadorship to Saddam Hussein. He had invaded Kuwait. I might not be talking to you today as a former ambassador. Oman was terrific. It has beaches like San Diego, and mountains like Tucson, and friendly, charming, exotically dressed people. And they had enough issues to keep me busy. Not quite as busy as Saudi Arabia was, but busy enough. All right, quickly, let me touch on some issues and then open it up for questions. Security. When I first joined the State Department, you could walk up to any office, no problem. You could also walk on an airplane. Life has changed. It really, I think, dates back to when terrorists blew up our embassy in Beirut, 1982, I believe it was. Then they started building embassies to withstand nuclear blast. We had an embassy in Oman that was built that way. It's a little embarrassing because Oman was, I'd say, 5 times as safe as Tucson. I had a bulletproof car I rode around to work. I had a Honda Prelude. You could throw a rock through the window that I drove around on my free time. So, security is really an issue. I mean, when you all remember Chris Stevens, who was our ambassador to Libya, was assassinated. With the Chris Stevens assassination and the political fallout from that, the concentration on making sure that we keep everybody secure has kind of interfered with the basic role of diplomats, which is to get out and build relationships. So it's a real challenge now. And managing that challenge is something to worry about. Dissent. You all heard about the 900 people who signed the dissent cable. Maybe you didn't. It's essentially against the immigration order, the Muslim ban in shorthand. And 900 people signed on to a dissent cable. Dissent cables have been around at least since Vietnam. There's never been 900 people signing one before. But dissent is an issue. Many of you may worry, what if I disagree with the policy? Well, I disagree vociferously with many U.S. policies, particularly in Saudi Arabia, in a position to really need to disagree. You do it essentially by putting together your best arguments, but you don't
go to the press with your dissent. Obviously, some people do. And the other opportunity, if you're a junior officer and your deputy chief of mission or your ambassador says, sit down, shut up, and do your job, you always have the dissent channel. You can write a cable, and they're not supposed to retaliate against you. In my memory, there was no retaliation against people who dissented. I was always glad for people to tell me what they agreed with and what they disagreed with. And if I agreed with them, then I would try to convince Washington to change whatever it was they were doing. Many times you fail, but sometimes you succeed. That makes it worthwhile. Political appointees. We're, unlike most European countries and the British, we have non-professionals inserted into fairly key jobs in our foreign service. About 30% of ambassadors are political appointees, friends of the president, donors to the president. Some of them can be embarrassing. I mean, clearly from confirmation hearings, you have nominees who haven't bothered to read the Wikipedia page for their country before they go before a congressional hearing. And my guess is we're going to have quite a bit of that coming up. That still leaves 70%, roughly, jobs for the career people. Probably won't be Ottawa or Paris or Rome or London or Sydney, excuse me, what's the capital of Australia, Canberra. But trust me, you don't really want to go to those places because the challenges aren't anywhere near the places like Saudi Arabia or Egypt or even Ecuador. Finland was not a terribly challenging assignment for me. Even though I loved it, my children were born there. But you want an assignment with some challenge, at least I think most of you do. If you just want to go on the foreign service to travel to some place that you could go on tour, you're probably not quite cut out for it. So, but also the other side of the coin is you may end up in places you don't want to go. The secret of my career is that wherever I went, I looked at what was good about it and embraced it and stopped bitching about what wasn't good about it. So that's more or less, there's something good about everything. My best job was Saudi Arabia. It's probably the last place I'd go as a tourist. Oman, loved to go as a tourist. But I was ambassador. It's cool to be ambassador. It's not always cool. I mean, you're on stage all the time, and it's like there's no privacy in your life. And again, when people have exhausted their arguments and still don't agree with you, you can say, well, we're going to do it my way because I'm the ambassador and you're not. So Oman was good for that. Egypt, terrific because of the history, the pharaonic monuments, the Islamic monuments, the people. Any Middle Eastern place now is very challenging. I would admit that. Hopefully, at some point it will be easier. But every place I went, there was something good about it. Cross-country skiing. Training. I've mentioned training. I want to tell you one more story about political appointees. Malcolm Toon was the professional. He was ambassador to the Soviet Union back when it was the Soviet Union. And he met an admiral at a cocktail party. And the admiral said, I'm about to retire from the Navy. And you know what I thought I would really like to do after I retire is be an ambassador. And Toon kind of looked him up and down and said, I'm about to retire too after I finish this assignment in the Soviet Union. You know what I'd really like to do when I retire? I'd like to be captain of an aircraft carrier. I hope I don't need to say more about it. being an ambassador is a profession. It takes experience. It's hard. I've told you the story of my family, more or less. One other issue is called the war du jour, if you will. It was Vietnam when I entered the Foreign Service. And somehow I managed to skate past it. I went to Ecuador and then on to Finland. We had a draft then, and my draft board was bought the argument that the State Department said I was serving my country in other ways. So I did not serve in the military, although after Iraq, I spent 7 years essentially working with the military on getting people ready to go to Iraq. It's a good example. It was a war I saw coming, opposed it. I even gave a speech here in Tucson about 7 days before I got assigned to Iraq. I was retired then, so I couldn't give a speech like that. And then all of a sudden I was working for the Organization of Reconstruction and Humanitarian Assistance, or as I called it, the Organization of Really Hapless Americans, which became the CPA, the Coalition Provisional Authority, run by Jerry Bremer. Anyway, after my experience there, I spent a lot of time going to various military bases in this country, and some in Germany and one in Korea, getting people ready to deal with the situation in Iraq. So I have worked extensively in the military, and I appreciate that they've been asked to do far too much. There's too much militarization of our foreign policy, and hopefully the balance will be restored in your lifetimes. The war du jour, if you will, turned out to be Iraq and Afghanistan, so a lot of Foreign Service officers ended up in Iraq and Afghanistan, which over the last decade it's been hard to avoid a tour there. I don't know what it would be like once you get in. Iraq and Afghanistan tours tend to be, only 1 year, but you're separated from your family. That's one other issue. Sorry, I'm using up all the time. Family. If you're married to a Foreign Service officer, they do whatever they can to assign you together. When you get to be ambassador, clearly you can't have 2 ambassadors at one post, or even an ambassador and a deputy at one post. So eventually, if you succeed, you may end up having to serve in separate countries. But a great deal of effort is made to accommodate married couples. If you're not a Foreign Service officer, there's great effort to make sure you can find some employment